So, have you guys ever seen those pieces that artists create seemingly without a pencil, or those like tattoos that you may see artists create without a template or a sketch or just anything beforehand? And you may be wondering to yourselves, how do these people create the depth that they want without being able to use like different depths of the pencil? And that's something that I myself have wondered a lot as an artist, like watching people just create something seemingly from nothing with just ink and just a dream, really. And these types of drawings are found everywhere. Like you find them like with comics, like with how they have like the pointillism that they use, or you may find it with tattoos and how they create just depth with only ink. And that's why today I'm showing you guys some different techniques on how to shade with ink. And you may have seen Miss Newfeld's like presentations that she gives on this stuff, and it's kind of based on that, similar techniques, a similar like demonstration style and all that. But I'm starting off with hatching, with our linear hatching actually. So the first step for linear hatching is to make your shapes. I already did all of that like in advance because I knew that would take forever. But the thing with linear hatching in particular is that it's only straight lines. So like when you go to draw it, it's really just straight lines. And you'll use those straight lines in the darker areas of your shape. And they'll overlap and they'll all be facing the same way, which is why it's linear, they'll all be parallel to one another. In those areas that are darker, you'll have more lines, which just creates that greater sense of depth. And it's a really simple technique. Like this is like the most basic form of shading with ink. Like the one that most people go to when they go to use ink. And now you have cross hatching, which you start off the exact same as linear hatching. So like you'll start with your first layer of lines and go all the way around, just in those areas that are darker. And then the thing that makes this different from linear hatching is just the simple fact that cross hatching crosses the lines. It's exactly what it sounds like. And in those areas that are darker in particular will have more lines, and it'll just cross over more. And obviously this is like a really messy example, but like in more complete pieces, those crossover lines will have a greater sense of depth and variety as well. And then to move on to like contouring, which is basically like a step up from hatching. The main difference between the two is that contouring follows the shape of your object. So as opposed to doing just like straight lines, your lines will follow the shape of your object. An example would be something like this, where like you see it has like that same curve as our shape does. And then obviously the closer to the center, the darker your lines will be. I'm just switching the tip on my pen because the other one's kind of dry, but. So it creates like that darker sense, like right in that area. And you may be noticing how I leave like an area right about there that's lighter. That's just like reflective light. You don't have to do that. It's just something that I've learned over time. And it can also be shown like that, but that would be more of a cross contour, which is my next one. So I'll start the same as a regular contour, just with like your general lines and stuff. And then the difference is that they also cross over each other. So for this one, I would just add more going up and around. It would still follow the shape of the object, they would still cross. And this is similar to cross hatching in the way that it creates a greater sense of depth and more variety in your lines. And the thing about contouring as opposed to hatching is that it tends to be more realistic in the way that it follows your shape, especially like with more 3D objects, like for example a face. You would use a contour line to follow the shape of like your cheek or like the shape of like that dip in your eye or something. It would just be a similar concept to that. Now for texture-based techniques, you have stippling and scumbling. For stippling takes forever. It's one of my favorite techniques to use with ink, and it's also what you would see like with pointillism and stuff, where it's just dots. Like you start with your shape and then you just add dots inside of it. And this is one of those techniques that takes a very long time. And it's also one of the harder ones to actually like get good at, simply because it takes a while. And it's one of my favorites, mostly because it's one of the ones that you see most commonly, especially with like comic book art and stuff. Like you see those like dots that they use in the backgrounds and stuff, and it's similar to that in a way. So like the darker your area would be, the more dots you would have, the lighter it would have less. And as you see, like even just that, it just looks darker right there than it would like anywhere else in that piece. And then scumbling is the last one I wanted to touch on, and that is just scribbles. That's exactly what it is. It's like really loose, undefined scribbles. And you see like even, scumbling is one of your easier techniques to master because it's literally just scribbling, and one of the things about it is that the areas that would be lighter would be looser, and then the areas closer together would be darker. So like you see here where I'm just scribbling more, that just makes that area darker, and then the lighter areas are around it. And then it just kind of fades into. And you can also see like a difference here in how much I was able to cover easily with stippling and how much I was able to cover with scumbling. And that also shows just how much harder stippling can be for people. So I also have a thing of just like things to remember when you're ink shading. And one of the things is line thickness. So like if I'm shading, let's say with just like a really thin tipped pen or something, and I'm just like using really thin, small lines, like you can barely see that first off. But secondly, it also looks way lighter than if I were to go in and do something way darker, let's say with like a thicker tip. Like there's a huge difference in how this seems to be like perceived by someone looking at your piece. And that's another thing with like line direction as well. So having lines that follow the shape of your object, like with the contouring that I mentioned, it shows like that greater sense of realism and it adds more depth to your piece. Whereas having like one like type of direction that may not follow the shape of your piece, this would be something that you see more commonly in like cartoony art, something where you want something to be more like presented and like bold. And going back to line thickness actually, I wanted to mention how with like realistic art, you may not see even like lines when you're doing line art. Like for example, you draw something, and one of those areas may be completely shaded, the other one may have like lines that go into it, but like, you may not see the lines as much as you would when you're like doing cartoons or something. It just all depends on the style of the artist. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on was just like patience, like learning to shade in any way with art, regardless of like what kind of art you're doing, what your style is, like what you are wanting to do with your pieces. It will always take patience, time, it will take a lot of practice to get to a point where you can just demonstrate it as well. And then just in conclusion, pen shading is found everywhere. Like no matter where you're at, like you can find it just about anywhere. And by using just simple little lines, like lines, the dots, the scribbles, all of that can come together to create really good cohesive pieces. And that's why I wanted to demonstrate all of this to you guys.